Thanks for watching so far. I hope that you enjoyed that core workout. Weeks that are coming up here in the next little bit, I really want to dive a little bit more into the science behind why these movements are crucial and what each movement kind of does specifically. So I think that this entire, core abdominal workout weekly video thing should start off with a basic outline of what are abdominals and then kind of go from there. So I'll outline what the exercises were that I did in this week's video, and then each weekend when I post a video, it'll kind of be along those same lines. It'll be why this exercise was implemented, what it did, what muscles were involved, kind of that general idea. To start off with though, we should go over the main muscle groups involved in the movements this week. So there are a few more abdominal muscles that are involved, but for the purpose of this video, I've kind of, reduced it down to about 6 that are like really important. So the 6 that I've outlined here will be the internal and external obliques, the transverse abdominals, pelvic floor, erector spinae, and then the 6-pack making muscle group, the rectus abdominis. So each one of these is extremely important in just us functioning and moving. If you are not familiar, however, with the abdominals, then I essentially just said a bunch of random words, which is not very helpful to anyone. So as a basic outline, I will go through each one of them just to kind of give an idea. So the internal and the external obliques. These two muscle groups are along each side of the body. What they are responsible for is the rotation of the trunk mostly. There is some bracing that is involved in the muscle group. The internal obliques brace the pressure increase within the trunk. The transverse abdominal is the least superficial, so the most deep muscle group that we have in terms of our abdominals. It is kind of, I believe it's called the corset muscle group, and it is essentially the biggest brace that we have. And that muscle group would be mainly for loaded movements in terms of exercising that muscle group. However, it is used day in, day out for the compression of the trunk, and it stabilizes the pelvic area and the low back before a movement occurs, before any type of movement occurs. So next we have the pelvic floor. Similar to the transverse abdominals, this helps the pelvis kind of function in a way. It helps support the abdominal and pelvic weight. So all of the weight of our torso and our trunk that falls on top of our pelvis is helped by the pelvic floor. Now the pelvic floor does have many other functions, but we're not going to get into those. We're going to try to stick mainly on the fitness aspect of these. So next we have the erector spinae, and this muscle group is very important. These are essentially 2 columns that run up and down your spine, and they are essentially used in the extension of the back. Day in, day out, they help with posture, they help with correct form when it comes to going to the gym. They protect the spine from loaded movements, rotational movements. They're an absolute crucial ab that is not what you would associate with the regular 6-pack or 8-pack abs. So that brings us to the 6-pack and 8-pack abs, which is the rectus abdominis. And this is the main muscle group of your 6-pack. This is what people like to show off, what people like to say, hey, I got a 6-pack. What they mean is, hey, my rectus abdominis is able to be shown because I have a low body fat, and it is somewhat prominent because, I'm not crumpling over on myself because everyone has abs. Anyway, so now that we kind of have an idea of what they are, we should know kind of what they do. So the function of each one of them I've kind of outlined. Now, there are many different functions that they do, and it technically would be absolutely impossible to limit them to a few different movements. The core, normally when it is engaged, works almost like a unit. So all of your muscles will be firing to some extent, some more than others, to protect your spine, to protect your organs, to protect you from injuring yourself when you are doing any type of movement in general. Walking up the stairs, just walking in general. But for the purpose of this video and for the 5 exercises that I have kind of laid out for this weekend's video, the functions I have reduced down to 4. So the first one I would like to talk about is the rotation of the trunk or torso. So the trunk or the torso, first of all, can be defined as any region essentially that is below your chin and above your pelvis. So it's where your core is, your chest is, it's where your shoulders would attach into. And the rotation of that is facilitated by 3 of these main muscle groups. So the first one and the second one are the internal and external obliques. Essentially that's their main goal anyway, is to rotate the torso. So that's great. The other one though is the erector spinae, and as I said, this is the muscle group that goes up and down the column of your spine. And so what this does essentially is it makes sure that your spine can rotate properly when you are performing a rotational movement. So the next one is bracing, and bracing is a very, very key aspect when doing any loaded movements. So loaded back squats, front squats, deadlifts, bench press, any type of movement in the gym. A push-up, for example, even needs a very strong brace in order to function without injury. So the main 3 muscle groups that facilitate bracing that we've kind of outlined here is the internal obliques, the transverse abdominals, and the pelvic floor. Now, as we briefly went over, the pelvic floor and the transverse abdominals are the main bracing muscles, but at the same time, you have your internal obliques, which also help with that pressure exchange within the abdominal cavity. So then you have flexion and extension of the torso. And these are your main movements in terms of your rectus abdominis. So your flexion would be your agonist movement, which is the movement that the rectus abdominis would do. And then your antagonist movement, which would be the extension movement, is what it would oppose to. So that's where your erector spinae comes in, because your erector spinae will help facilitate the contraction of each one of those muscles, will help facilitate a back extension. So these are really prominent in loaded deadlifts and loaded back squats, as they oppose the pulling movement and essentially keep your torso upright when you are pulling the weight. Now the flexion is the part that I'd like to focus on almost the most though. So this is the movement that the rectus abdominis actually facilitates the most. So the flexion is going to be the movement that will build your 6-pack essentially. Now, of course, you do also have some external oblique movement when you do a flexive movement, and that is just based on the external obliques running up and down the side of the body. They can attach and they help essentially pull your chest toward your like knees or your hips in order to actually compress that movement fully. So now that we've kind of gone over the functions of each one of these different muscle groups, we should talk about the actual movements that we did. So the purpose of each exercise that I've outlined here today. So we started off with bird dogs, and the bird dogs were crucial in the flexing and extension of the rectus abdominis and the transverse abdominals. The rotation aspect, as each one of your limbs will be their opposite limb interactions will be pulling the body one way or the other, which will activate the obliques in order to stabilize that movement. And then you have bracing, and bracing is kind of used in every single movement, as I've said, just to prevent injury and to essentially hold correct position and form throughout the movement. So next we have this cool oblique crunch variation. And now I got this from Jeff Cavaliere at athletex.com. And he has some really awesome movements, and I think that his social media page actually does a very good job at portraying how movements should be done. So if you don't know who he is, yeah, I definitely go and check out some of his stuff. I'll leave in the description box just kind of his information generally, so you guys can see some of his stuff, but absolutely amazing stuff. So I got this oblique crunch variation from him, and essentially this works on your rotation as well as bracing, just in order to keep the position correct. But the rotation is the very key part. So now we've performed 2 exercises that are going to be focusing on rotation, a little bit of extension and flexion, yes, and bracing throughout the entire thing. But next, let's talk about the advanced sit-up. So if flexion is what we should be focusing on to build that six-pack, then let's focus on it. So 3 of these 5 exercises focus almost primarily on flexion of the torso, the pulling of the torso, the compression of the abdominals in order to grow that rectus abdominis. So starting with the advanced sit-ups, we have rotation just based on the opposite hand, opposite foot interaction. This is one of my favorite exercises. I think that it stimulates almost every core group that you have, apart from your transverse abdominals. But the bracing, the flexation, and somewhat extension, as well as the rotation are key within this movement. Next, you have the leg lift. And this was a great movement based solely on the fact that it is flexion in a different way. So we focus on the range of motion a little bit differently in this movement as we did in the advanced sit-up position, because when we pull the legs toward the torso, we activate essentially the lower region of the rectus abdominis. And so this lower region here helps us so that we can essentially get full range of motion with the rectus abdominis. The last exercise that we've kind of outlined is plank. Now, when I did my plank, I did a extended plank. By extending the plank, you make it a little bit harder on the rectus abdominis to work. You focus a little bit more of the attention on the lower part as well, so that it's just a little bit harder overall for the rectus abdominis to fire. But if that is too complicated of a movement, then the regular plank, elbows under shoulders, will be totally fine. The key thing here though is that it is an isometric contraction that we're doing here. So now we have a different type of movement. This different type of movement is crucial because it will work different muscle fibers within the core. Now, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, I mean, I'm doing one every single weekend, feel free to hit the subscribe button and the little push notification bell there so you guys don't miss a video. Also, feel free to share these videos with people. I know that there's lots of people out there who would love to see something like this. If you have any comments or anything like that about the video, feel free to message me on Instagram or on Facebook, or just leave a comment down below or whatnot. If there's something in specific you'd like me to put in a further video, let me know as well, because I would love to have some good ideas from you guys to see whatever you guys would like to see. As it is, every single weekend there'll be a new core video. I know that for myself, I'm still working on so many of the movements, and there's lots of form and lots of muscle that still has to be developed and worked through. But as it is, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video next weekend.